Hello, everyone, and welcome to English in Advance. My name is Jessica, and I am so happy you are here with me today. If this is your very first time listening to our podcast, I want to tell you something very important. You did not find us by accident. You are here because you have a desire to grow, to improve, and to become the best, most confident version of yourself. And the wonderful news is that you are not alone on this journey. We are here together, every step of the way. We believe that learning should be a joy, not a chore, and that when knowledge is shared with encouragement, it can truly change lives. So, if you are ready to take a small but powerful step in your English journey, if you are ready to feel inspired, and if you want to believe more in your own amazing potential, then I invite you to stay with us. Press that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you never miss a chance to learn with us. Let's walk this path of growth together, one small step, one single day at a time. Now, maybe you are learning English because you want to travel the world and see new places, to feel the cobblestones of an ancient European city beneath your feet, or to order a coffee in a bustling New York cafe. Maybe you want to speak with friends and family from other countries, to bridge the distance with shared stories and laughter. Or perhaps you need English for your school or your career to unlock new opportunities and achieve your professional dreams. Whatever your reason is, whatever your personal why might be, you are in the perfect place. Because today we are going to talk about something that every English learner dreams of: speaking English fluently. We're going to explore not just the how, but the why and the what fluency truly means, and how you can improve your English speaking skills, and do it fast. But first, let's think about that powerful word, fluency. For many people, the word fluent sounds very intimidating. It sounds like perfection. They imagine someone who never makes a single mistake, who knows every single word in the dictionary, and who sounds exactly like a native speaker from a Hollywood movie. This image of perfection can be paralyzing. It can create a fear of speaking, a fear of being judged, a fear that holds us back. But let me tell you a secret, a very important secret that can change your entire approach to learning English. That is not what fluency is about. True fluency is about connection. It is about being able to express your ideas, your thoughts, and your feelings to another person, and understanding them in return. It is about communication, not perfection. It's about being understood, not about being flawless. I want to tell you a story about two of my former students. Let's call them David and Maria. David was, by all academic measures, brilliant. He had studied English grammar for years. He could diagram a sentence perfectly. He knew all the rules of verb conjugation, and he had a huge vocabulary of impressive academic words. When he spoke, his sentences were grammatically perfect, but there was a problem. David was so focused on being perfect, on not making a single mistake, that his speaking was very slow, deliberate, and robotic. He would pause for a long, uncomfortable time before every sentence, his mind racing to find the right verb, tense, the right preposition. He was so terrified of making a mistake that it was incredibly difficult to have a natural, flowing conversation with him. The conversation would stop and start, like a car with a bad engine. Then there was Maria. Maria's grammar was not perfect. She was a work in progress, just like all of us. Sometimes she used the wrong verb tense, or she forgot the S on a verb in the present tense. She didn't know as many big, fancy words as David, but when Maria spoke, her entire being came alive. Her face lit up. She used her hands to describe the size of a fish she once caught. Her expressions showed her excitement when talking about her favorite movie, and her voice was full of energy and passion. She told funny stories that made you laugh. She asked thoughtful questions that made you think. She wasn't afraid to make mistakes. In fact, she embraced them as part of the learning process. If she didn't know a word, she wouldn't stop and panic. She would creatively describe it, saying things like, "It's the thing you use to put pictures on the wall," instead of a hammer. Or she would simply use a simpler word. And you know what? Everyone loved talking to Maria. Conversations with her were easy, fun, and engaging. She was a truly fluent speaker, not because her English was perfect, but because she could communicate her personality, her humor, and her ideas effectively. She was a connector. So, as we go through our discussion today, I want you to hold the image of Maria in your mind. Our goal is to become confident communicators, like her. Now, you might be thinking, "Okay, Jessica, I understand. Fluency is about communication, not perfection. But how do I get there? How can I improve my speaking skills fast?" The answer might surprise you. It's a bit of a paradox. The most important, the most powerful thing you can do to improve your speaking is to improve your listening. It sounds strange, doesn't it? To speak better, you must listen more. But think about how a child learns their first language. A baby doesn't start with grammar books or vocabulary lists. A baby simply listens for months, for years. A child is immersed in a sea of language. They listen to the gentle cooing of their parents, the playful chatter of their siblings. They listen to lullabies, stories, and the constant symphony of conversations happening all around them. They are absorbing the sounds, the rhythm, the melody of the language. It's a subconscious process. And then, very slowly, they start to make sounds. Gurgles become babbles. Babbles become words. Words become simple sentences. Speaking comes naturally. After a very long period of intense, passive and active listening. As adults, we can tap into this same natural process. The more you listen to real, natural English, the more your brain gets used to how the language actually works in the real world, not just in a textbook. You start to automatically understand common sentence structures without having to think about the grammar rules. You pick up new vocabulary and idioms in context, which is the best way to learn them, and you begin to develop an intuitive feel for what sounds right and what sounds wrong. I had a student once. I will call her Anna. She was a wonderful student, very smart and incredibly hardworking. Anna always did her grammar exercises perfectly. Her written essays were excellent, clear, and well-structured. She could explain complex ideas very well in class. But one day, she came to me looking utterly defeated. Her shoulders were slumped, and there were tears in her eyes. She said to me, her voice trembling slightly, "Jessica, I don't understand. I study for hours every day. I know the rules inside and out. But when I try to listen to a movie without subtitles or a podcast for native speakers, my mind just becomes a blank wall. People talk so fast, it feels like a storm of confusing sounds. I can't catch the words. I can't understand anything. I feel hopeless." Does Anna's experience resonate with you? Maybe you feel the same way sometimes, and that is completely 100% okay, because what Anna was missing was not intelligence, not ability, and certainly not effort. The real problem was this. She had trained her eyes to read English, but she had not trained her ears, and more importantly, her brain, to process English as a living, breathing language. English is not just a collection of rules and vocabulary in a book. It is a language that lives in conversations, in songs, in movies, in the rhythm of real human interaction. And to truly understand it and to eventually speak it fluently, you need to train your brain through listening, step by step, patiently, just like a child does. But I want to make something very clear. When I say daily English listening practice, I do not mean you must lock yourself in a room and study for many hours every single day. No, that's not necessary or even effective for most people. Even just 15 to 20 minutes of true, focused listening can make a monumental difference in your progress. And I want to stress that very important word again. Focused. Simply having English audio playing in the background while you cook, clean, or scroll on your phone is fine. This is called passive listening, and it helps a little bit. You might get used to the general sound and rhythm of English, but if you want real, tangible improvement, strong, deep understanding that translates directly into fluent speaking, you need to practice active listening. What does active listening mean? It means you are fully engaged. Your mind is present. It means you are listening with a purpose. You are trying to understand the main ideas of what you hear. It means you are listening carefully for the key words and phrases that stand out. It even means you are trying to predict what the speaker will say next. This is not just hearing, this is a mental workout. You are thinking with the language, and when you do this consistently, your progress will not just grow, it will explode. Let me share a story to show you this in action. This time, it is about a young man named Kenji. Kenji loved to travel. His ultimate dream was to take his backpack and visit many English-speaking countries, including a long road trip across the United States from California to New York. He already knew some English, enough for simple conversations like ordering food or asking for directions. But he wanted more. He wanted to feel comfortable and confident when talking with strangers, in spontaneous, unplanned situations. So Kenji began listening to our podcast, English in Advance. At first, it was incredibly challenging for him. He told me, his voice full of frustration, "Jessica, I only catch one out of every 3 words, maybe even less." I smiled and told him that is completely normal. Many learners start exactly where you are. Do not feel bad. This is not a sign of failure. It is the starting line of your growth. Then I gave him some simple, actionable advice. I told him, start small. Don't try to listen for an hour. Start with just 1 or 2 short episodes per week. First, listen once, all the way through. Do not worry about every single word. Just try to understand the general topic. What is the story about? Who is talking? What is their mood? Then, listen again. This time, embrace the pause button. Pause the recording often. Write down new words you hear. Look them up in a dictionary. Play back the difficult parts again and again and again. I explained that this repetition is incredibly important. It is like when you trace the same drawing over and over until your hand remembers the shapes and can draw it by itself. In the same way, Your brain needs repeated exposure to the sounds, the patterns, and the meanings of English until they become second nature. Kenji's big breakthrough, the moment everything changed for him, happened when he started using the written transcripts we provide with our podcasts. But he did not just read them. He used them as an active listening tool. His method was simple but so powerful. First, he would listen to a short section of the podcast, maybe just 30 seconds, without the transcript. He would try his best to understand. Then, he would listen to the same 30-second section again, but this time he would read the transcript at the same time. This was a revelation for him. It helped him connect the sounds he was hearing with the words on the page. He could see exactly what he had missed or misunderstood. He could see how words like going to often sounded like gonna in natural speech. Then, he added one more powerful technique, a technique called shadowing. Now, maybe you are wondering, what is shadowing? Shadowing is when you listen to a short piece of audio and then you immediately repeat it out loud. You try to copy everything: the speaker's pronunciation, the rhythm, the intonation, which is the way their voice goes up and down like music. It is like you are the speaker's echo or their shadow. At first, shadowing might feel strange or even a little embarrassing. But trust me, it is one of the absolute best ways to improve both your listening and your speaking at the same time. It trains your ears, your brain, and your mouth to all work together in harmony in English. It builds muscle memory in your tongue and lips for making English sounds. And it helps you develop a more natural-sounding accent and rhythm. Kenji practiced this method. Listen with the transcript, and then shadow, almost every day. At first, he still needed to look at the transcript very often when he was shadowing, but after a few weeks of this focused, active practice, something amazing started to happen. He found that he didn't need the transcript as much anymore. The sounds that once felt like a fast, confusing river of noise were now becoming clear. Distinct words and sentences with real meaning. He was starting to connect the dots in his mind effortlessly. One special day, Kenji sent me a long, excited message. I could feel his joy radiating through the screen. He wrote, "Jessica, you won't believe what happened. I was sitting in a coffee shop today in my city. 2 tourists from America were sitting near me, and for the very first time, I understood their conversation. Not just a word here and there. I understood the whole thing. They were planning their day, deciding if they should visit the museum or the park first, and complaining about the price of coffee. I was so happy. I almost cried right there in the coffee shop. For Kenji, this moment was a turning point. It was the first time he realized that his hard work, his consistent daily practice, was truly paying off. He later told me something very important. He admitted that he did not understand every single word in that coffee shop conversation. There were a few expressions he missed, but here is the good part. He still understood the main idea, the overall meaning, and the feeling of the conversation. And to his great joy, he even understood a joke one of them made about the local weather. And he smiled at the right moment, sharing in their humor. In his message to me, he wrote, "It was such a small thing, but for the first time, I felt like I was really in the conversation, not just an outsider watching from far away. It was an amazing feeling of connection. That small moment, that feeling of connection, changed everything for him. Because learning English is not just about passing a test or getting a good grade. It is about something much bigger. It is about opening new doors in your life, creating new experiences, and having opportunities that go far beyond the classroom. It is about connecting with other human beings on a deeper level. So now, let us ask the big question. How can you make this kind of focused, active listening practice a simple, natural part of your everyday life? Let's break it down into easy, practical steps you can start today. Step 1 is the most important step of all. You must choose topics you truly enjoy. You must listen to things that you find genuinely interesting. If you are listening to something boring, your mind will inevitably wander. You will lose focus, and when you lose focus, you will not get the full benefit from your practice. So, think about what excites you in your real life, in your own language. Do you love learning about the mysteries of the universe? Then find podcasts or YouTube videos about astronomy or physics. Do you enjoy cooking? Then listen to cooking shows or food-related podcasts in English. Do you like history or psychology or true crime stories? Great. There are thousands of English podcasts about every topic imaginable. When you listen to something that truly interests you, your brain becomes more active and receptive. You actually want to understand, and because you are curious, the learning process feels more natural, more like fun and less like work. Step 2, start simple, and then slowly increase the difficulty. For learners at the B1 or B2 level, I always suggest starting with materials made especially for learners of English. For example, this very podcast. We speak at a clear, steady speed. We choose interesting topics, but we try to avoid using extremely complex or unusual vocabulary. Once you feel more confident with this level, you can slowly move on to authentic materials, things made for native speakers. This could include news reports, documentaries, interviews, TV shows, or YouTube videos on topics you like. The key is to increase the difficulty step by step, like climbing a ladder one rung at a time. If you jump into something that is too hard too soon, you will feel lost and frustrated, and you might give up. But if you slowly challenge yourself, you will keep growing without feeling overwhelmed. Step 3 is to use the 3-step listening method we talked about with Kenji's story. Let's imagine you have chosen one short podcast episode or a short video in English. Here's that simple method you can follow. First, listen for the main idea. Play the audio or video one time, from start to finish. At this stage, do not use subtitles or look at any written text. And most importantly, do not worry about understanding every single word. Your only goal here is to catch the big picture, the general idea. Ask yourself, what is the main topic? Who is speaking? What is their general feeling or tone? Are they happy? Sad? Excited? Serious? What is the overall message? Think of it like looking at a painting from a distance. At first, you just see the big shapes and colors. Later, you can step closer to look at the small details. Let's do a quick practice together right now. I am going to tell you a very short, simple story. Your job is to listen carefully just one time, and then try to identify the main idea, the most important message. Are you ready? Here's the story. Last weekend, my friend Emily decided to try baking sourdough bread for the very first time. She spent hours watching videos online and reading different recipes, trying very hard to do everything correctly. But when she finally took her bread out of the oven, the loaf was flat and heavy, almost like a rock. She felt a wave of disappointment. But then she looked at the funny-looking bread and started to laugh. Instead of giving up, Emily decided she would try again next weekend. She is determined to become good at this new baking challenge. Okay, that's the story. Now, think for a moment. What is the main idea here? It is not about the exact number of hours Emily studied. It is not about the scientific reason why the bread was too heavy. The main idea is simple. Emily tried a new skill. Her first attempt was a failure, but she chose to learn from it and try again with a positive attitude. That is how we focus on the main idea. We understand the big picture without getting lost in the small details. After you understand the general meaning, it is time for the second step of our method. Listen for details. Now you go deeper. You listen again. But this time, you focus on the details and the specific words and phrases. This is where you get more involved with the language. Play the audio again. But feel free to pause often. Go back and repeat as many times as you need. Your goal here is to notice specific words, useful phrases, and interesting grammar patterns. For example, in Emily's story, maybe you hear the phrase, a wave of disappointment. That is a beautiful, useful expression you can practice and use yourself to describe a strong feeling. Here's a tip. If you hear a new word and don't understand it right away, first try to guess the meaning from the words around it. The context, the situation of the story often gives you strong clues. If guessing doesn't work, then you can look it up in a dictionary. It is also a very good habit to write down the most useful new words and phrases. You can keep them in a small notebook or in a notes app on your phone. But remember, you do not need to write down everything. Only choose the words and phrases that seem most important and useful for you, the ones you can imagine yourself using in a conversation. This second stage is also the perfect time to add shadowing. Remember? Listen to a very short part of the audio, and then immediately repeat it out loud. Try to copy the speaker's pronunciation, their rhythm, and the way their voice goes up and down. Shadowing is such a powerful exercise because it builds a strong bridge between listening and speaking. It trains your mouth and your brain to work together smoothly in English. Now, let's go back once more to Emily's bread baking story. This time, I will repeat the story. As you listen, try to notice a few of the important words and phrases. If you feel confident, you can also try a little shadowing. Just repeat some of the sentences after me. Copying the way I say the words, here's the story again. Last weekend, my friend Emily decided to try baking sourdough bread for the very first time. She spent hours watching videos and reading recipes. Her first attempt resulted in a loaf that was a bit flat and very dense, almost like a rock. She felt a wave of disappointment, but then she looked at the funny-looking bread and started to laugh. She decided to try again next weekend, hoping for a lighter, fluffier loaf. She is determined to master this skill. Did you notice some of the key phrases? For example, sourdough bread, hours watching videos, flat and very dense, a wave of disappointment, lighter, fluffier, determined to master this skill. These words and phrases are very useful. They give richness and detail to the story. Also, notice the contrast. Emily's first bread was flat and dense. But what she really wanted was something lighter and fluffier. Understanding these differences, the problem and the goal, helps you to follow the story more clearly. Now, let's move on to the third and final step of the 3-step listening method. This step is often forgotten, but it is one of the most powerful parts for deep, long-lasting learning. This time, when you listen, your focus should not only be on the words or the details. Instead, you try to connect what you hear to your own life, your own experiences, your own thoughts and feelings. You can ask yourself questions like, does this story remind me of a time I tried something new and failed? Can I summarize the main points in my own words? If I were Emily's friend, what advice would I give her? Can I guess what might happen next in the story? Will her next loaf of bread be better? When you think this way, you are no longer just passively listening. You are actively engaging with the language on a personal level. You are making it a part of yourself. This is where real, meaningful learning begins to happen. Let's go back to Emily's story one last time. Maybe as you listen, you think, oh, I remember when I tried to cook a new recipe for the first time, and it was a complete disaster. The chicken was burned on the outside and raw on the inside. I felt frustrated too, but I learned a lot from that mistake. Or maybe you think, I wonder what recipe Emily used. Maybe she should try a different kind of flour next time. That might help her get a lighter texture. Do you see how this works? When you connect the story to your own thoughts, memories, and questions, the language becomes much more personal and meaningful. It changes from being just a school subject into a practical tool for real communication and understanding. Now, I want to tell you another real-life story that shows just how powerful this kind of consistent, active listening practice can be. This is the story of a man named David who moved from Germany to the United States, to Chicago, for a new job in an architecture firm. David's English was already quite good, especially for his work. His job mostly required technical discussions about building designs and formal exchanges with clients, and he could handle those situations well. But outside of work, when it came to daily life, to casual conversations and social situations, David often felt completely lost. Even though David's English was strong enough for the office, he quickly discovered that social English was a very different challenge. In formal meetings, he could understand every sentence and respond clearly. But when his American co-workers relaxed and started chatting after work, especially when they went out for drinks or to a casual lunch, he felt like he was in a different country. The conversations were fast, full of jokes, slang, and cultural references he had never seen in a textbook. He once told me with a shy smile, "Jessica, I understood every word of the 3-hour presentation on structural engineering, but when my colleagues started talking about a TV show called The Office, it was like they were speaking a totally different language." This is a very common experience for English learners. Many students know thousands of vocabulary words and all the grammar rules. But real-life speech is not the same as a school book. People speak quickly. They shorten words. They use idioms and colorful sayings that you cannot easily translate word for word. David, however, was determined not to give up. Instead of avoiding these confusing social situations, he made a plan. He decided to train his ear every single day. He started listening to American radio programs and podcasts, especially ones about things his colleagues talked about, like American sports, comedy shows, and local Chicago culture. At the beginning, it was extremely difficult. He admitted that for the first few weeks, he understood very little. Sometimes he felt so frustrated. He was almost ready to quit, but he made himself a promise. No matter what, I will listen for at least 30 minutes every evening. And he kept that promise religiously. Now, here is the really clever thing that David did, something I strongly recommend to all of you. He practiced what we call guessing from context. Instead of pausing the recording every single time he heard a new word, instead of constantly running to the dictionary, David trained himself to listen carefully to the other words around the unknown word, to the tone of voice, and to the overall situation. He tried to make a smart guess about the meaning. For example, one day he was listening to a podcast where two hosts were talking about their busy week. One of them said, "Man, after that long flight and 3 back-to-back meetings, I am absolutely wrecked." David did not know the word wrecked, but he heard long flight and 3 back-to-back meetings. He also noticed the tired sound in the speaker's voice. From these clues, he guessed that wrecked must mean something like very tired or exhausted, and he was exactly right. This skill of guessing meaning from context is so incredibly important. Why? Because in a real conversation, you do not have time to pause the speaker and check a dictionary. You need to be able to keep going, keep listening, and still follow the main idea, even if you miss a few words here and there. David kept up this practice for 6 months. At first, he could only understand the general topics of his colleagues' conversations, but slowly, something amazing started to happen. He began to understand the jokes. He started to recognize the local slang. He began to feel the playful rhythm of casual American English. And even more exciting, he started to use some of these expressions himself, naturally, without even thinking about it. I remember one afternoon when David came to me with a huge smile on his face. He said, "Jessica, yesterday at lunch, my boss said he was swamped with work. A year ago, I would have been confused, thinking about a swamp with water and trees. But because I've heard that word so many times on podcasts, I knew exactly what he meant. He meant he was extremely busy. And I replied, 'Yeah, I'm in the same boat.' And everyone nodded. I used an idiom in a real conversation. That is the true power of steady, consistent listening. It is not only about learning words or grammar. It is about understanding culture, humor, connection, and belonging. Language is not just a school subject. It is a bridge that connects you to people, to relationships, and to real life. So now you might be wondering, how can I make this a daily habit for myself? How can I keep listening every day? Not as a boring duty, but as something I actually look forward to. The secret is to integrate listening smoothly into your normal routine. You do not need to set aside big chunks of dedicated study time. Instead, you can use the small, natural moments that already exist in your day. Think about your daily schedule. Do you have a commute to work or school? You can listen to a podcast in the car, on the train, or on the bus. Do you cook dinner every evening? You can listen while you chop vegetables. Do you go for a walk or to the gym? Those are perfect times for listening. You can even listen for 10 minutes before you go to sleep. By linking your listening practice to an existing habit, it becomes automatic and much easier to maintain. Now, to help you practice all of these ideas, I want to share a longer story with you. This story is designed for B1 and B2 learners. I will tell it in a clear voice. The story is full of useful vocabulary, natural phrases, and descriptive language. You can use this story to practice the 3-step listening method. First, just listen for the main idea. Then, listen again for details and new words. And finally, think about how the story connects to your own experiences. You can also use parts of this story for shadowing practice. It's a little long, so get comfortable, and let's begin. In a small, quiet village nestled between green hills and a sparkling river, there lived an elderly woman named Mrs. Higgins. She lived in a cozy little cottage with a bright blue door and a garden that was famous throughout the village. Her garden was a masterpiece, overflowing with colorful flowers of every kind. But the most famous of all were her prize-winning roses, which were the most beautiful, fragrant roses anyone had ever seen. Mrs. Higgins was not alone in her cottage. She had a very unusual companion, a large, bright green parrot named Captain Squawk. Mrs. Higgins had inherited Captain Squawk from her brother, who had been a sailor and had traveled all over the world. The captain, as she called him, was a loud, dramatic, and very talkative bird. He spoke with a gravelly voice, and he used a lot of strange, old-fashioned pirate slang that he had learned on his sea adventures. Phrases like "shiver me timbers" and "ahoy there, matey" were common greetings in Mrs. Higgins's peaceful home. Despite his loud personality, Mrs. Higgins adored him. He was a constant source of amusement and sometimes a little bit of fond exasperation. She would often be quietly tending to her roses, and Captain Squawk would suddenly yell from the window, "Land ho!" startling the neighbors. One morning, as Mrs. Higgins was working at her garden, she suddenly heard a sound. It was not a normal sound like birds singing or the wind blowing. No, it was a desperate, high-pitched crying sound. It came from somewhere behind the tall, overgrown hedge that marked the edge of her property. Mrs. Higgins stopped what she was doing, her face filled with concern. Slowly, she pushed her way through the thick leaves. Then she saw the source of the noise. There, stuck in the sharp, thorny branches of a wild rose bush, was a tiny kitten. It was no bigger than her hand. Its fur was wet and matted, and the poor little animal was shaking from fear and cold. "Oh, you poor dear," Mrs. Higgins whispered softly. Her voice was gentle, full of kindness. Very carefully, with slow and patient movements, she began to free the frightened kitten from the thorns. It wasn't easy, because the branches were sharp and the kitten kept struggling. Captain Squawk, however, reacted in his own dramatic way. When he saw the kitten, he flapped his wings, puffed out his chest, and shouted in his loudest parrot voice, "Shiver me timbers, a landlubber, avast ye scurvy beast!" He was trying to sound strong and scary, like a pirate warning off an enemy, but his loud squawks only made the poor kitten even more frightened. The tiny animal began to cry louder and struggle more wildly, making it harder for Mrs. Higgins to help. Mrs. Higgins sighed. She looked at her parrot with a mixture of love and mild annoyance. "Captain, please," she said softly, "you are not helping at all." At last, after much effort, she managed to free the kitten. She held it carefully in her hands, pressing it gently against her chest. The small creature was trembling so hard that Mrs. Higgins could feel it. It was cold, weak, and clearly very hungry. She quickly carried it inside her cozy little cottage. There, she wrapped it snugly in a warm, soft blanket. She placed the kitten near the fireplace and poured a small dish of milk. Captain Squawk followed them inside, watching everything closely with his sharp, curious eyes. He hopped down from Mrs. Higgins' shoulder and strutted closer to the kitten, tilting his head from side to side. Then he spoke, his voice softer this time. "Ahoy there, little matey. Lost your ship, have you?" to Mrs. Higgins' surprise. The kitten stopped shaking for just a moment. It looked up at the bright green parrot with wide, curious eyes. It was as if, even though it was afraid, it could sense something kind in the bird's voice. Over the next few days, Mrs. Higgins took very good care of the kitten. She gave it food, kept it warm, and made sure it had a safe place to sleep. She named the kitten Pip because of the tiny, insistent squeaks it always made. Pip slowly grew stronger. He began to walk around the cottage, play with bits of yarn, and chase shadows on the floor. He was still a little nervous whenever Captain Squawk made one of his boisterous pronouncements. But deep inside, he seemed to know the parrot meant no harm. Captain Squawk, in fact, took a liking to the kitten. He would often drop little pieces of his dried fruit near Pip's sleeping place. Sometimes, in his usual pirate voice, he would squawk, "Eat up, me hearty." Mrs. Higgins smiled every time she saw this unusual friendship growing between the big, dramatic parrot and the tiny, timid kitten. One sunny afternoon, an important visitor came to Mrs. Higgins' cottage. It was the mayor of the village, Mr. Henderson. He was a tall, serious man who almost never smiled. People in the village respected him, but they also thought he was a bit of a pompous man, a bit too strict and formal. Mr. Henderson had come to talk about the plans for the upcoming village flower show every year. This was one of the biggest events in the community, and Mrs. Higgins's beautiful roses were always the main attraction. Mrs. Higgins invited him inside, and they sat down in her cozy living room. The mayor began to speak in a very serious tone about the prize categories and the rules for judging. While the mayor talked, Pip the kitten was busy planning his own adventure. He had grown stronger and much more playful, and now, seeing the mayor sitting so stiffly in the big armchair, Pip saw a new mountain to climb, quietly, carefully, with soft little steps. Pip jumped onto the side of the chair. He moved so slowly that Mr. Henderson, who was completely preoccupied with his important conversation, did not notice a thing. Step by step, Pip made his way up onto the arm of the chair, his tiny paws silent against the fabric. Captain Squawk was sitting on his usual wooden stand, his eagle eye watching the scene unfold. He noticed the mischievous glint in Pip's eyes. At that very moment, Mr. Henderson was saying in his proud, serious voice, "And I believe, Mrs. Higgins, your Crimson Glory Rose will surely win first prize, just as always." But Pip was not interested in flowers. He had reached the top of the armchair, and then, with a sudden, dramatic leap, the kitten jumped straight onto the mayor's lap. Mr. Henderson was completely unprepared. 1 second, he was talking about flowers. The next, a warm or furry projectile had landed right on him. He let out a loud, surprised yell. "Good heavens! What on earth was that?" he cried, jumping to his feet in shock. As he stood up so quickly, his teacup tipped over, clattering loudly to the floor. Tea spilled everywhere. The mayor's face went pale. He stood stiffly, his hands shaking. Captain Squawk, of course, could not keep quiet. Seeing the chaos, he puffed out his bright green chest feathers. "Land ho! Abandon ship! The Kraken attacks!" he bellowed at the top of his voice. Mrs. Higgins gasped in embarrassment. Oh dear," she said quickly, rushing forward. She gently picked up poor Pip, who looked very confused by all the shouting. "Oh, Mr. Henderson, I'm so very sorry," she said, her cheeks red. "This is Pip, my new kitten, and that is Captain Squawk. I promise. They are usually much better behaved." The mayor took a deep breath. He carefully straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. Slowly, his stern facade began to change. Instead of pure anger, there was now a hint of curiosity. "A kitten, you say?" he murmured, looking at the small animal in Mrs. Higgins's arms, and a talking bird? His eyes moved to Captain Squawk, who was now standing proudly, very pleased with his performance. "Aye, a talking bird he is," Captain Squawk announced, but this time in a much more polite, almost charming voice. He bowed his head slightly. "And a fine lady, Mrs. Higgins. She rescued the little creature. Aye, she has a true sailor's heart." For a moment, there was silence. Then, to Mrs. Higgins' great surprise, the mayor let out a small, genuine laugh. It was not forced or polite. It was real. The whole situation was simply too absurd, too unexpected for him to stay serious. "Well, Mrs. Higgins," he said, a real smile spreading across his face, "it seems you have quite a lively household indeed. Perhaps," and here he chuckled again, "we should add a special award to the flower show this year for most adventurous pet." Mrs. Higgins smiled warmly, relief washing over her. In that moment, she realized that sometimes the most unlikely friends, a boisterous parrot and a mischievous kitten, can bring joy and laughter and soften even the hardest of hearts. Of course, Captain Squawk had to have the final word, and a double ration of crackers for the captain? "Wouldn't you agree, me hearties?" he squawked proudly, completely convinced that he had saved the day. What a fun story, right? A story like that is perfect for listening practice. It has interesting characters, a clear plot, and lots of descriptive language. Phrases like fond exasperation, stern facade, lively household, and mischievous glint are wonderful expressions that can make your own English sound much more natural and advanced. I encourage you to listen to that story again. The first time, just enjoy it. The second time, pause and write down some of the new words and phrases. Try to guess their meaning from the context before you look them up. Then, for the third time, try shadowing some of the sentences. Choose a few lines from Mrs. Higgins, or even from Captain Squawk if you are feeling brave, and repeat them out loud. This kind of active, engaged practice is what will truly accelerate your journey to fluency. It is also very important to listen to different types of English materials. Podcasts like ours are great, but you should not rely only on them. Listening to different accents, different speeds, and different topics makes your listening skills stronger and more flexible, which is essential for real-life conversations. You can try listening to interviews. Interviews show how real conversations naturally flow. You can find interviews on YouTube with famous people experts, or just regular people with interesting stories. Documentaries are also excellent. The narration is usually clear and well-spoken, and you can learn about fascinating subjects at the same time. Audiobooks are another fantastic resource. Listening to a book is immersive and helps you get used to the rhythm and flow of English over a long period. A great tip is to start with a book you have already read in your own language. That way, you already know the story, and you can focus completely on the language. The key is variety. By using different listening materials, you make your English practice more interesting, more effective, and more fun. And finally, remember that the main goal of daily listening practice is not to understand everything perfectly right away. The goal is to get better, little by little, over time. Some days you might feel like everything is easy and you understand a lot. Other days, it might feel like you are not moving forward at all, or even going backward. That is completely normal. Learning a language is a journey, and it naturally has ups and downs. The most important thing is to keep going, to be consistent, and to be kind and patient with yourself. Celebrate every small success. Did you understand a joke in an English movie? That's a victory. Did you follow a conversation for 2 minutes without getting lost? That is amazing progress. Don't get discouraged by setbacks. They are just part of the journey. Your brain is a powerful tool. With steady listening and active practice, it will naturally start to recognize patterns, guess meanings, and understand more and more of what you hear. Think of it like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger and more capable it becomes. And before you know it, you will start understanding English more easily. You will follow complex conversations with confidence, and you will feel truly connected to the world of English speakers, ready to share your own stories, your own ideas, and your own unique personality. Thank you so much for joining me today on English in Advance. I hope this episode has given you more than just useful tips. I hope it has also given you inspiration and practical ways to make English listening a fun and natural part of your daily life. Remember, every single minute you spend immersed in English is a step closer to speaking with the fluency and confidence you deserve. So please, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications so you can join us for our next episode. Keep listening, keep learning, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. Until next time, this is Jessica, wishing you happy listening.